business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Steve Ramona. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the pod.
Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. Every episode is an invitation, a reminder that business and life isn't just about profit, it's about purpose. It's about showing up with a servant's heart in every deal, every decision, every day. And that key is every day. No, you not can't do it every day, but if your goal is every day to make a powerful impact on others, you're going to be a success. Today's guest, he's going to light you up. It's my second time I'm meeting him, but we're going to talk about some very cool things. He's Hawaiian, which is very cool. He's going to motivate you. He's going to challenge you. But I think more importantly, and something you want to grasp here, audience, you're going to walk away with tools that inspire action, both in your life and the lives of others. Before we dive in this great podcast, here's your homework today. How are you going to serve yourself and others today? Remember, it doesn't have to be a big impact. Even a small act of kindness or courage can change the game. So let's lean in, take notes. Let's discover how servant leadership in business can create ripple effects that last far beyond the bottom line. Quick shout out to my sponsor, Epic Impact. The only universal, emotionally resonant messaging framework that works anywhere for any audience. This 4-step storytelling system transformed how I pitch, how I social media post, and how I podcast. My stories now engage, persuade, inspire, and close with clarity. I use it daily and it works. So grab your free trial at epicimpact.ai with promo code Steve to start inspiring action today. And celebration audience and guests, I want to thank all of you. We hit top 20 in small business marketing. It's because of you sharing these great stories, these great podcasts, make an impact on people's lives. Continue doing that so we can continue impacting people forever. With that being said, James, welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart.
Aloha.
Aloha. Hono Pono prayer. Talk about what it's about and your unique take on that, because I've told you right before the show, I think I told you in the past, it's changed my life. So I want to really talk about that.
I want to create a foundation for it first before we start talking about and why it came about in my culture. You know, when Hawaiians happened on the islands over 1,000 years ago, you know, what they found was a paradise. They really did. You know, they had left the South Pacific, they sailed, they had an inkling that was there because there was part of a prophecy that said that there was a land that was there. And so when they landed, they realized what they had found. Over the first few generations, what ended up happening is that they squandered the limitless resource that they had. And so they realized that they had to create a way of self-sustenance. You know, I mean, think about Hawaii and where it is in the Pacific Ocean. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. So there was a way of life that had to come into an understanding. And the way of life is in some ways what people call ohana, which is realizing that we are all interconnected and that we are all important. And so each person inside of that wheel, the cog inside of that wheel, so you talk about business, every person inside of a business is important, right? And when that wheel, when that machine is not working efficiently, then it causes ripples that go out, not just for the people that may be in conflict or the place where it's out of alignment, right? The energy is out of alignment, but it causes ripple effects for everybody in the community. And when the community is made up of people that are interconnected and dependent on each other, they have to find a way of resolving conflict. And really, Hono Pono is a process that the Hawaiians came up with as a way of resolving conflict through spirituality. And so if you look at Ho'oponopono Pono and you kind of pull the word apart, you know, Ho'o is like a prefix, it just means to or of, right? And it's Pono Pono. So because the word is doubled, it gives it more emphasis, right? And so the understanding, or if you looked in the Hawaiian dictionary and you looked up the word Ho'oponopono, you would find 2 words, and it says to correct. And that's it. And so the process and the practice of Ho'oponopono is to correct. It's a method of conflict resolution and a way of bringing people together to look at what the issues are from the standpoint of I mean, and there's some very fundamental principles inside of that, and that is coming together. And for the way it was created and the way that I see it is Ho'oponopono is a ceremony, right? And so inside of the ceremony, and they realize that people may not have been able to work things out on their own. So what we did in Hawaiian culture was they realized that they needed to put somebody in the middle, in some ways like a referee, right? Or a mediator. And so a mediator would be assigned, somebody that both sides would mutually agree to. Is usually a kahu, which is a priest, or some elder that was respected in the community. And so and there was a recognition that there was a problem, and there was a recognition that we needed to find that the solution needed to be found. And so they would take all of that and they would come into ceremony. So before even the process started, there was pre-work, if you want to. There was emotional, spiritual, physical clearing. So people would go into and they would have cleanses, and they would be in deep meditation, and they would put themselves in the right frame of mind when they came together. When they came together, then there was a prayer that the kahu, that the mediator would say, and then he would explain there were ground rules inside of that. And one of the big ground rules inside of that I think is really amazing, that I don't think that we have in our modern society, is that everybody has to listen to everybody else. So part of the process is once the conflict is identified and everybody agrees, right? So this again, this is the place where Pono is. Pono is about coming into right relationship with yourself. In other words, so if you're out of balance in your life, being able to find balance inside of your life, really being able to look at how you live your life, if you're out of integrity, how you treat people, how you treat yourself, right? And that's the starting point for everything. And so everybody would understand that. So the ceremony begins, and once whatever the conflict is identified and agreed upon, then what would happen is there's a series where whoever it was, if it was just two people, if it was a group of people, everybody would have a chance to say everything that they wanted to. And without interruption, you could not interrupt. You actually had to let that person talk. And so you could sit there and fume, or you could do deep listening, and you could actually pay attention to what and sometimes it may take more than one time for people to understand that, and more than one time that the explanation needs to be happen. So as you're either having the opportunity to share your feelings, or you're at the opposite end of it, doing your best to receive and to listen. And I think that's part of what I was talking about, where we don't have in our modern society, is that we are so engaged in being right. We are so engaged on our point of view. And all of our social media platforms are built on that, right? So there is nowhere for conversation anymore. There's nowhere for anybody else's opinion except for mine, right?
Yeah.
And so what do we find in our modern life? No resolution. All we keep doing is moving farther and farther apart. Thank God we're not interdependent on each other, although we are. And then people won't realize that or say that, but we actually are, and they don't see the interdependence, right? So inside the ceremony, they would have that chance to listen and have a chance to speak their minds. And then the kahu, the mediator, would look and say, okay, are we ready to find a resolution? And if we can't let go of where we are, then he would say, okay, go pray.
Yeah.
And so he would let people go, and they would have to go back. And the thing about Ho'oponopono is that you go and you come back until you find this place. But inside of that, there's a couple fundamental things that have to take place, right? Again, fundamentals, right? I got to look at my own life. I have to look at what my part was in how this was caused. And for most people, that is probably the hardest thing for us to realize, is that all my choices and all my decisions in my life is why my life is why like it is, right? because we are a race of people that do not want to take responsibility for where we are and are constantly blaming somebody else for everything that's happening in their life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, and we need this more than ever now, especially the incident last week with the assassination. And I'm not going to get into that, but that we're so divisive. And I'm glad you brought social media up, James, because we both agree it's causing problems. So I remember that. I remember the words, but there's words that are said. Is that still Hawaiian to say those words? I'm sorry, I love you. I don't remember all of them.
Actually, the answer would be no.
Okay.
It is something that came out of a concept from a teacher that the people that created that had. And the thing about it is at the time that it was created, it made sense. It was 25, 30 years ago. Okay. We weren't in the place. I'm going to say it this way, and this is not a rub on anything else like that. I don't think that consciousness was in the place and the level that it is now. Right. And so because it was a little bit denser, we literally needed something that was way easier than that. And so the practice, the I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. It was something that people, it was easily to remember. It was a cadence that was there that would be easily to implant. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Right. But the more that they did that, the farther away from Hawaii, from it being Hawaiian that it got. Right. Which is kind of why I've been writing a book for the last 2 years about everything that we're talking about to kind of put that all together. And the reason that that's happening is because my Hawaiians call them your kupuna, my ancestors came to me about 7 years ago and they said, you need to fix this. And I was like, why me? Why now? And they said, because we're choosing you. And I resisted for about 4 years. And so finally, about 2.5 years ago, I started writing a book. I finished my last chapter edit this morning.
Beautiful. Congrats.
And I have some minor fixes, but it's going to go to my editor for a second manuscript assessment at the end of the month. So, and I hope that when this comes out that it'll help people understand, because it's not about the process, the group process, but inside of the group process of Ho'oponopono, Pono, which is what we were talking about. There's also this spiritual journey of this, and everybody talks about that, the spiritual journey of the self finding the self, right? The self finding the higher aspect of who we are. And that's what I want to be able to share with people and give people tools to be able to do that, And first is you got to look and figure out what the issues are. You have to really take stock of your life and see where you are. And then once I see that, and one of the things that I talk about is, can I start to see the patterns and the behaviors that are put me inside of that? Because without being able to recognize the patterns, you're not going to be able to change them. They're just going to keep running unconsciously, right? And then once I find the patterns, and then it's like the place, and this is even in the process inside of those traditional processes. Now that I see my impact on the world, now that I see my impact in the conflict, now that I see my impact in the choices that I've made, am I ready to take responsibility?
It's beautiful. So let's take the prayer out there. Let's do this traditionally. So somebody listening, a selfish question for me too. So how do I do the Hono Pono prayer, the Hawaiian version? If I'm saying it wrong, I put a traditional Hawaiian. How would I do that?
Well, I have a step-by-step process.
Oh, in the book? If it's in the book, that's fantastic.
It is in the book, and that's why I'm doing that. So the book is basically broken into 3 pieces. The first part is I'm going to talk about the process, and I'm going to explain the traditional process. And then the second part of the book is going to be called Ho'oponopono for Everyday Life. And so in it, I'm going to share my tools and the things that I've come up with over the years, the things that the ancestors and have talked to me about, and share it, plus my story, because I use my story as a backdrop. I came from a very broken home, and I had physical and psychological abuse growing up. And so is my transcendence of that as I go through that. And then the third part of the book, which is I think probably the most important part, is Ho'oponopono and self-care.
Oh my God. Okay, you just sold a book. Come buy it. Done. So, audience, anybody behind me buys the book, we'll get all the information how you can connect.
We'll get the information. And at the end of every chapter, I gave people, I call them thoughts for contemplation. So I gave people a space where they can take the chapter, look at pieces in their life, and start to put that together so that when they got to the end, they would have their own model for how to move through conflict. That was my wish, and that was basically what the team said to do as you're writing. So the reason that it's taken me a long time is because I was writing the workbook, the book, and the workshop retreat at the same time. I was like, oh my God, you guys, can't you make it easier? And they were like, no, you do this all at once. And it was like, okay. So that's where we're at. So back to the original process, right? That piece of having to look at that, having to take responsibility, and then, okay, where's my responsibility? Do I need to make amends? Is there compensation? Is there some piece inside of this where we come together so that we can say this is resolved, this whatever this conflict that has been resolved, right? And this is the cool thing that's all inside of that. Forgiveness might be part of it. But see, with the way that it was created, that whole process and practice that everybody understands about Ho'oponopono is all about a practice of forgiveness. And the reality is that forgiveness is just one small part of that inside of everything else that we have to look at, right? Everything that's not have to. I don't like to say have to. Everything else that we're being invited to look at, right? Because I can't tell you what to do. Not my job. I can share with you the information, and then just like everything else in our life, it becomes a choice, right? It becomes a choice. It's the cool thing about Ho'oponopono, and again, this is another piece about human behavior, right? And I'm going to ask the audience this. How many of you can think of somebody that could be last week, last year, 10 years, 40 years ago, that every time you think about them, you still get a sick feeling in your stomach, or it still elicits some kind of emotional response? If it did, then you're still holding on to it. If it did, then there's no Ho'oponopono. If it did, then you haven't resolved that, right? And so inside of the traditional practice of Ho'oponopono, when everybody came together and they said that it is done, it is implicitly understood that it is never talked about again. When that circle is broken and the kahu releases everybody back into their life, and they said that the ceremony is complete, which, by the way, we close with prayer and food, because Hawaiians are about food.
Good food, by the way.
When you share food with people, that's community. When you cannot share food with somebody that you're not in relationship with. It's challenging, right? When that is done and he releases people back to their lives, it is understood that whatever that is never spoken of again. And if there is still things there, that means that you're not resolved. That means you come back. And so the process sometimes could take months.
Yeah, or years. Well, you know what? You just sold a second book, so I have to buy 2 books now. This is, well, conflict's a big problem with the world right now. And you're coming out, your forefathers are doing you perfect, because the timing couldn't be any better. So God bless you. But, one thing about you when I first met you, I haven't told you this, I'm going to be very honest. Of course I'm going to be, I always say that. Of course I'm going to be honest. You're so passionate about being Hawaiian. And when I go to Hawaii, it's a community that treats you so well. Why are you so passionate about being Hawaiian?
I'm passionate about the way that we live, because it was really a model for everybody. And which is one of the reasons why people love to go to Hawaii, because there's this intangible thing that they get when they're there and they don't understand what it is. And that's aloha, right? It's this place of this interconnectedness and understanding that we are all here, and that we all are important to each other, right? And so it's that understanding of that. And am I the ambassador of that? I don't know if I'm the ambassador of that, but I do know that without that connection, our world will stay broken.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't see how we impact each other. And it's stuff that's going on the other side of the world. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on, right? People will say, oh, that's just those people going through that thing. But no, really, A really quick story, side story. Do we have time for a story?
Yeah, absolutely.
I lived in New Zealand for a few years, and that is just a whole. We could talk about that at another time, Steve.
Sure.
But and anyway, one night I was in a meditation. I was in a group meditation with a group of people, and I had an experience that I had never had before. I'm preface this by saying, when I lived in Hawaii for a time, I lived right on the beach or close to the beach, and during the winter time, the whales come to Hawaii. They would wake me up at night. They would swim because I lived at a place where there were cliffs and rocks. And so the water, you jumped off into 30 feet of water right in front of my house. Okay. So where I live. And so they would wake me up. They would swim back and forth and splash and bang their tails. And I would hear them and I would go out on the rocks and just sit. But there was this connection. I've swam with them before, which is again another amazing experience that we can talk about at another time. Um, it's amazing to have this 40-ton animal look at you, and their eyeballs are like the size of a basketball, and when they see you, they see you.
Wow.
It's like I've never been seen before like that, right? Anyway, put that aside. And you can tell I'm a storyteller.
I love it.
I was in this meditation, and in this meditation, I saw a humpback whale. And as I was in this meditation, it was like I was sucked into the eye of this humpback whale and went into the eye of the humpback whale. And when I came out on the other side, I was looking up. It almost was like a night sky, right? And there were all of these lights, points of light up in the sky. So imagine this: everywhere you look above you, there's points of light. And then every once in a while, this thing would shoot across, kind of like a meteor, but it would shoot across. It would touch the points of light, and it would go, and then another point of light, and it was just kind of like it was going back and forth like that. And in that moment, I got this understanding. All those points of light were all the people. It was humanity, right? And those energy bursts that were going through was a thought or an idea or a form that was going through. And as one person had it, everybody had it. And that was the night I realized that we are all connected. It was such a profound experience. I came out crying because I get emotional now because I'd never had that experience before. And I was like, oh my God, there it is.
Wow.
People talk about oneness, and I just experienced it.
It's a blessing. Absolute blessing.
And so when you talk to me about passion, right? I look at that and so for me, it's helping people understand the impact that they have. And you and I, you talked about this, the one word that you say, the one action, the smile, whatever it is. You know, I did a Facebook post last week, and I got a message from a niece. I haven't seen her in 30 years, right? And I was, at that time, it was my first relationship, so I don't really have an association with the family or anything anymore. But she saw my post and she wrote me and she said, Uncle James, she said, I miss you. And she's in her 40s now. And I knew when she was like 10 years old. She said, you made such a difference in my life, and I have no idea what I did. And she said, I still think about you, and I still think about being with you. Thank you for everything that you did. Made me cry when I read that.
I'm gonna
Right?
tear up. Oh, that's an impact.
But the thing about it is we all have that ability. We all have that ability to make that kind of an impact in my life, in people's lives, right? And so for me, that's where I am now. I've been hiding for the last 15 years. And I got a big sharp boot up my butt right now, and the ancestors are saying, you need to be out there. You need to be out there. You need to be talking to people. You need to be sharing your stories. And I said, and I think I'm ready. Actually, not even think. I am ready. So the opportunities to share information with people, opportunities to let them know, listen, you are beautiful inside of who you are. And even if you can't see it, other people can. I can see that. And so my piece inside, and I say, is I just want to help people realize the beauty of who they are, right? And I think that's all of our goals.
Yeah, and then I'm 5'8", 64 years old. I'll never play in the NBA. That's a finite thing. Nobody can argue it. But being empathetic and serving people, which is so excited to have you as a guest, anybody can do. It's in our soul. And I'm feeling my soul talking to me because of what you just said. It's so beautiful. Um, let's end with a fun question. And we're going to bring him back because part 2 is going to be probably bigger than part 1. But so I've got to, let's take Hawaii, your favorite restaurant. We got a table there, table for 4. You're going to sit in one of the chairs. Who would you invite, whether dead or alive, a mentor, somebody you looked up to, somebody you'd love to talk to for a few hours? Those 3 people. And what food would you order for the table?
My choice would be one of 2 people. First off, I either want to talk to Jason Momoa or I want to talk to The Rock, because I want to team up with them, because I think together we can make an impact. And so I want them at the table because I want them as my collaborator, my collaboration partner, right? So that we can share this. Okay. The second person that I would have, I would, it's funny because the person that comes to my mind right now is Neil Armstrong. And I'll tell you why I would pick Neil Armstrong. Because, or any astronaut that's been in space. Because the first thing that astronauts talk about when they come back is they go, wow, you know what I didn't see when I was up in space? And borders. There are no fucking borders, excuse my language, between countries. I saw everything as it is. And so anybody that goes into space, any astronaut that spent its time in space, when they come back, it changes them forever. So I want to have that conversation with them.
That's amazing, James. Oh my God. What a vision. I'm thinking there's no borders. Yeah.
There are no borders. That's what the first time I heard that 25, 30 years ago. And I was sitting with an astronaut, and he was in a room. I mean, it wasn't just me, but he was in a room. And when he said that, it was such a profound effect. It literally hit me. It hit me on the side of the head, that was there. And then the third person that I would actually have sitting at my table, and I never thought about this, and I'm going to get a little bit emotional, is I'd have my grandmother there.
Amen.
And the reason that I would have my grandmother there is because when I was 4 years old, she had a stroke. And as I was getting older, and she was the one that passed all this knowledge to me. She handed this to me. But then she got sick and she couldn't teach me what was going on. And the rest of her life, it frustrated her. So I stopped talking to her, because every time I went to ask her about a question, because she couldn't speak because the stroke affected her speech, she would get frustrated. And so I didn't want to frustrate her, and I didn't want to hurt her. And so I stopped talking to her. So I would love to have her sit at that table, because she's with me all the time. People say, who's that lady on your left shoulder? And I said, it's my grandmother.
Amen.
Grandma Emma. She's always there, right?
Grandma Emma.
And so I would have Grandma Emma sitting at that table, and I would say, okay, Grandma, here you are. Here's the people. We're going to talk about this. How are we going to do this now? Because that's what I ask her every day. How are we going to do this? Right?
So God, I love it.
So what would I order? In my head, I go, I'm just going to order dessert.
Nothing wrong with that. Let's make it a dessert table. No problem with that. It's beautiful.
I would just order dessert and coffee, or dessert and tea, or whatever your hot beverage of your choice is, and we would just sit, so that we didn't have to worry about, I mean, eating is nice, and I love eating with people, but it would be that way so that we can just enjoy each other, enjoy what we're eating, and enjoy each other's company. Talk about how we can make an impact.
I would be the wait staff for that table, because I want to hear that conversation. If you allow me, I may even sit down, because audience.
I think I might have to invite you, Steve.
I would so love it, because The Rock is one of I've reached out to his team to get on my podcast. People are like, oh, you're crazy. I said, no, that's a service. And you said Jason Momoa, 2 of my favorite Samoans, besides all the wrestlers. But those 2 guys have the biggest Hawaiian heart of anybody. Powerful.
And
we're so aligned.
The thing about it, the both of them is, and this is the beauty of this, is that they both understand their responsibility. There's an impact. They went out, made a change, and then realized, okay, now that I'm here, right? The whole reason Jason created that series that's on Apple right now was he wanted everybody to understand what was going on. That was huge. Apple bought off on that, gave pretty much carte blanche to go do what he wanted to do. I mean, my God, that is epic what he did.
I'm not a big Apple guy because I don't use Apple. They're okay, but kudos to Apple to let them do it.
Yeah, well,
I'm gonna
yeah,
give them a big thumbs up.
but the thing about it is it was the understanding of the responsibility to the culture that he was bringing back, and he wanted to share with people because he said this is really what it was. And there were lots of things about Hawaiian culture that were it was very patriarchal. It was very much a warlike society, yes, and yet there were protocols that were in place because there was in the elite class. Yeah, it was about rule, but there was also this understanding that they were stewards for the land and stewards to the people. That first and foremost was making sure that their people were safe, making sure that their people had everything that they needed, right? So that's the part of Hawaiian culture that I see. So
a lot of love in that culture. I got to get back to Hawaii, and I got to tell you, James, what an incredible guest you are. Because if I had any stress, an audience, if you've had any stress, I'm sure it's gone. Does it come back? I'm sure it does because that's life. But you just gave me 25 minutes of the most peaceful 25 minutes I've had in many years. So God bless you.
You're welcome. It's what I do for people every
Yeah.
day. I help you. That's part of what I do is stress management and mindfulness and things like that. And then there's so many other layers that are inside of that. But you listen, so I did my job. I accomplished because that's what it is. It's about helping people feel better about themselves or inside themselves, right?
Grandma Emma, you're smiling because your grandson James is a rock star. I'll use Gen Z terms because that's absolutely true. Thanks again for being a great guest. I know people want to reach out and connect with you. How can they do that?
Well, you find me on social media, and I will just say I'm about to jump into the TikTok ring.
There we go.
So look for me there in the next coming weeks. I'm putting not my program, but my profile together, and I'm deciding what I want to talk about, and it's going to be about being in integrity, being in a relationship with yourself. So and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about. So there. I'm coming slowly back into social media. I'm hoping to build not hoping, I am in the process of rebuilding my LinkedIn space. So on LinkedIn and Facebook. And you can find me at www.jameskawainui. So James Kawainui. And you can sign up and I will tell you this, I will speak to anybody for free for 30 minutes. So if you want to have a conversation, all you got to do is let me know.
And I'm not surprised, audience. This is a true servant's heart. A better description for it, but definitely a servant's heart. Thanks again. And audience, here's your homework at the end. I say this a lot, but really with this podcast, it's a gift for yourself or others. You're having a stressful day? Listen to James for 10 minutes. I'm going to keep this, but share it to others going, I just listened to James on a podcast and changed their lives. That's what we need to be doing. Hono Pono, using podcasts for that. With that being said, me and James want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone. God bless. Aloha.
Aloha.